My name is J.R. Myers, and I'm going to discuss the procedural safeguards, also known as Public Law 94-142. The objective of this law states that its purpose is to assure that students who are disabled in some capacity has a free, appropriate public education which provides them with special educational services designated to meet their needs. This law is provided to assure the protection of parents and guardians, to assist states with preparation for educating all students, and to assist the efforts to educate all students with or without disability. Public Law 94-142 was also known as the Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975. This was a landmark piece of legislation regarding education of children with disabilities. This law was an amendment to the Education of Handicapped Act of 1970. Congress has made several changes to PL 94-142. In 1990, Congress changed the title of EHA to IDEA, or what we know as Individuals with Disabilities Act. So how is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act structured? It's really organized into four parts, which has remained the same since its original enactment in 1975. So there's four parts. There's a Part A, B, C, and D. Part A is the general provisions. This part includes findings and purposes, definitions of terms used throughout, such as special education, native language, a child with a disability, and free, appropriate public education. Requirement for employment of individuals with disabilities, and requirements for individualized family service plans and procedural safeguard mechanisms. Part B includes assistance for education of all children with disabilities. This portion of the law contains the largest number of program requirements and represents the very core of the idea. This includes matters related to fiscal policy and money management among federal, state, and local jurisdictions. Also part of Part B is the responsibilities of local education agencies, school districts, but also directed to organizational units such as collaboration of school districts for special education purposes. And then there's rights, protection, and responsibilities in the educational process, including evaluations, eligibility determinations, individualized education programs, and educational placement. Part C involves infants and toddlers with disabilities. This is a national program that provides early intervention services to children from birth to age 3 who are at risk of developmental delay. This part includes a definition of the eligible population, a listing of authorized services, requirements for a statewide system in each state, and requirement for an individualized family service plan and procedural safeguard mechanisms. Part D involves national activities to improve education of children with disabilities. The major components of this includes coordinated research and innovation, professional preparation, studies, evaluations, and ongoing national assessments of the idea's effectiveness, and parent training in information centers, including community parent resource centers. So going back to public law, which is part of the IDEA, before public law was enacted in 1975, there were several laws that excluded children, and that includes deaf, blind, mentally, physically, and emotionally disabled. So obviously before 1975, I think it came to the point where teachers didn't really know how to teach students with disabilities. So therefore they pretty much said, hey, we're not going to teach you. You got to go elsewhere. And so this affected over 1 million children and kept them from getting a public education, which in the end was a violation of the 14th Amendment. So what are the 6 pillars of the IDEA, or Public Law 94-142? So the first one is the Individualized Education Program, or IEP. All students who have some kind of learning disability is pretty much required to have a individualized education program, some kind of plan to have in place for that student, some kind of guidelines to kind of help get that student to where they need to get to. All right, number 2 is the guarantee of a free, appropriate public education. Number 3 is the requirement of education in the least restrictive educational environment. 4 is the appropriate evaluation. 5 is the active participation of parent and student in the educational mission. And then the last one is the procedural safeguards for all participants, which is pretty much what this presentation is about. So what are procedural safeguards? Procedural safeguards protect the rights of children with disabilities along with their parents. So this is like a safety net. So, if there's any issues or concerns with students with disabilities, they have a safety net in place, them along with their parents. These safeguards involve the rights for parents to participate in meetings regarding their child. These safeguards include the right to examine all educational records of their child. Parents are given the right to obtain an individualized education plan, and then parents are permitted to be notified when the school proposes changes or refusal of their child's IEP, evaluation, or placement. Any teachers, any educators, if you're an educator, we're all in some capacity have been part of some kind of IEP meeting. I've been involved in several of them, and obviously before those IEP meetings take place, it's very, very important that the parents are notified as soon as that the special education teacher decides on a date. When there's a date in place to meet to discuss that student's goals, what needs to be worked on, what they excelled at, what they struggle with, anything like that, the parents need to be notified. This public law also involves a numerous number of ways to resolve parent-school conflicts. This law includes mediation and due process hearings. So parents have the right to an impartial hearing along with a impartial hearing officer. This law guarantees the right to be accompanied by an attorney. Parents play a critical role in this law because the law recognizes that parents understand the needs of their child, and they can work cohesively with teachers, specialists, and school officials to determine the best course of action. So in the end, this law is very, very, it's a very good law to have, simply because it just gets everyone involved. So the teachers don't feel like they're doing it by themselves. And the parents don't feel like they're not doing it by themselves. So in the end, it's more of a teamwork kind of thing when you talk about this law being in place. It benefits everyone. So the first court case that really influenced this law is the Park versus Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This court ruled that that the state could not deny an individual's right to free education based on the child's intellectual disability status. So the Park organization presented the case on behalf of 14 families with intellectual disabled children. Park versus Pennsylvania was one of the first cases to establish that people born with intellectual disabilities have the same access to education as everyone else. The second case is Mills versus Board of Education in 1972. So in 1972, there were 7 students that had been denied placement into a public educational program due to their disabilities. They were denied constitutional rights to due process. The District of Columbia argued that they could not provide for the students due to the lack of financial resources. So in the end, the court ruled that no student be denied education due to disabilities. Um, the court also ruled that the funds must be equally shared in such manner that no child be excluded. So this case actually took place not too much longer after the Park case that we just discussed. So this happened, I think, around close to the same time. And then the third one is the Burlington School Committee versus Massachusetts Board of Education in 1985. So in this case, parents were given the right to be reimbursed for providing a private education for their child. So if the public school is unable to provide the necessary resources, or if the IEP goals are not met adequately and effectively, the parents are to be provided with reimbursement of their expenditures to a private school. So, if a public school does not have the funds, or they simply can't get whatever that student needs, and that parent decides to go to a private school, that parent can be reimbursed for whatever financial burden that was put on them. So this is under the PL 94-142 that procedural safeguards are met. So in conclusion, the procedural safeguards are put in place to make certain that students with disabilities and their parents are guaranteed safeguards while given the freedom to a free and appropriate education. Thank you for watching.